As far as how the folks met, they didn't really grow up that far apart. Mom grew up about, Marvin, a mile and a half, 2 miles south of here. Mm-hmm. And Dad grew up about, maybe 6 or 7 miles east of here. And so there was, probably neighborhood dances and so forth that they may very well have attended or something. I don't know as I ever really even asked them how they had met. But, of course, Mom had a whole bunch of brothers. And I'm sure the guys would probably have gotten together, and that may be how they met.
Are there some of them still around?
Her brothers? Yeah. No, they've all died. Mom was, I think, one of the very last that died. See, she died in 86. I really get confused on some. There's that middle to last 80s was kind of a rough time. I get things confused in my mind. But anyway, they started out, I think, with Dad doing some farming for neighbors in the area. I can remember he used to be real fond of recounting a story about a fellow whose last name was Mee, M-E-E, and how he and somebody else got into an argument because Dad was recounting a story, and they said, "Well, where did you hear that?" And Dad said, "Me told me." And I imagine there may have been a little liquor involved, but anyhow, it was a story that he was real fond of telling. But yeah, they lived here for a while. Some of the older kids were born up in this area. Some of them were born south of the river. And then they, I don't know how they worked their way east till they got down to the Emmett vicinity. And they lived in one big old stone house down there for quite a few years. It was the house where I was born. They lived there quite a few years before and after I was born, and that's where most of the kids grew up. They used to, Sis and Art and Ray, I think, said they used to follow the railroad tracks into Emmett to go to school. And then in the summertime, when school was out, they'd have to go back in for, 3 weeks or a month or so for religious training. And it was a shortcut to take the railroad track.
Oh, was it Catholic school?
Uh-huh. Well, yeah, the nuns taught it, I think, the religion at that time.
That wasn't at St. Joseph's Church?
No, the church at Emmett, I believe, is Holy Cross. Holy Cross is the church at Emmett. St. Joseph's is over here at Flush. And, of course, everybody was grown and gone. Bob stayed with the folks. And, like I said, after Dad's leg was hurt and he came home from the service, then whenever the folks moved, he moved too, because they were doing things in partnership. He did live in a house by himself down there by between Emmett and Delia, and this is where he hooked up with Bill Remington, who had a big dump truck, and they hauled gravel and stuff together. And then a cousin up here, Mom's niece, told them that this farm was for sale. And so they came up and looked at it. And, of course, this was coming home for both Dad and Mom, especially Mom, because it was more in the area where she grew up. So they bought it, and in 1950, in March, we moved up here. Left a house with electricity for one that didn't have electricity. And I was still in school, and my God, it was fun doing homework by kerosene, because you had to light a match to see if the lamp was lit. It was, it was just so dark compared to electric lights. And then I think it was in spring, maybe May or June, Marvin, when the electricity came through?
I think so.
Of 1950, so we weren't very long. But in that amount of time, yeah, the big old barn that sits over there sat, almost a mile over the hills on the what was called the Torrey Road then, which is now called Possum Hollow Road. No, what the heck is it called? That's what we always called it, because there was a little, did you see the camping area down in there? Yeah, and the reason why it was named Possum Hollow, I don't know whether you care about this or not, but because we were it was Marvin's family that was doing the camping, and because we were the ones that lived the closest, and it was my folks' property, we went over and cleaned it up because there was, you know, dead trees and everything in there. And one evening we were over there, and it was getting pretty dark, and there's this big stone wall, and we could hear something walking on the back side of that stone wall. Now, our kids were still fairly young at that time, and Teresa, who was the youngest, got scared. And Ed, being the boy, he was going to get really brave. So he jumped up on the stone wall to see what was over there, only to meet a possum coming his way as he was going his way. He jumped down off of there, scared the heck out of him because he wasn't expecting to see that animal up there. So that's how it got dubbed Possum Hollow, is because Ed got so scared over there. But yeah, and that's when they lived over there, when Dad got his arm caught in that corn picker, and it just got a hold of his sleeve and went right up through his elbow. And he was in the hospital quite a long time that time because they were afraid of blood poisoning and stuff. It was, of course, I was in school all day, so all I got to see was what they did when they got it, you know, at the end of that day's time. They went over and they jacked it up. Marvin, do you remember? I know you weren't in the family yet then, but I'm sure the entire neighborhood was, you know, kind of keeping an eye on this. They had these big trucks that were kind of flatbed trucks, and I don't know how they braced that barn well enough, because even the lean-tos that were on there were moved with it. And they put them on this big flatbed trucks, and they brought them over some hellish hills. I remember seeing it jacked up and on these truck beds, and then by the next day when I came home from school, it was setting up on the hill just above the house. They only had but a short distance to bring it the rest of the way, but they didn't have the foundation quite ready yet. I've got pictures of it.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, sitting where it was before they brought it down and put it on the foundation. Oh. And so then, yeah, after they got it there, of course they had to rebrace it a little again because it got, I mean, those hills are, I mean, you know, see what the hills that we drive around here, you can imagine what the pasture hills were like. And I think they kind of came in from the northeast with it. They didn't come just straight west over the hills. But yeah, it must have been a sight to see, because like I said, by the time I got home from school, they had brought it as far as they were going to. And then when they got the foundation done, they set it on the foundation while I was at school, so I still didn't get a chance to see it. It's just too bad you didn't get back before Bob died, because he'd have been the one that could have told you all this kind of stuff. He was there for it. But yeah, they still had horses when they moved up here. I mean, they had tractors, but they still had some horses as well. Some of the, like Milo, they didn't have combines that would do it. They cut it and shocked it and ran it through a threshing machine yet. So it was kind of ancient, you know, kind of caught between the two worlds, more or less.
Yeah, my memories are of the crank phone on the wall,
yeah,
and the hand pump in the kitchen for water.
Right, and that was there for quite a long time. And then right outside the back door was the water pump, because the one that had the water in the kitchen sink was rainwater. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, it would have been a
And
sister.
then I remembered the windmill in the creek in the back. Was that hooked to a pump there?
Yeah, it was hooked to there was a pump on the bottom of that, and that was, of course, the livestock water. And between, and you know that bank, I mean, the house sat very close to that really steep bank in back there. And on that bank, there were springs that would pop out all over. And of course, as wet as what, you know, those early years where there was constantly fresh water running there. I don't think they ever had any trouble with the kitchen well going dry, did they, Marvin?
I
Until
don't think so.
until maybe, you know, years later. But yeah, they would butcher their own meat, and especially the pork. And they had a little building down just southwest of the house where Dad would cure and smoke the meat, so that they had cured bacon and cured hams and this kind of stuff. I can remember him taking especially the hams and just spend hours rubbing and rubbing this mixture of salt and sugar, and I think saltpeter was the curated that type stuff. And then he would take the butcher knife and drill holes down closer to the bone and pack that mixture in there so that it would cure all the way through. Otherwise, if it didn't cure all the way through, it would spoil. And then they'd hang them, and he would start hickory fire in the little building down there. He had a little stove, and he tried to keep that fire just at a smolder all day, all night for I don't know how long. I can't remember. But I mean, you know, that was some really good eating. You don't find that kind of flavor out of the stores unless you pay big money to get it. And gosh, I can remember when they'd have gardens, and they, of course, that house sat halfway up that hill. So in order to find a place that was level enough, they went down fairly close to the creek, and they'd plant, you know, all the old regular vegetables and potatoes to the point where when it came time to dig them, they'd take the horse and plow and go down the row and open the row up, and then we'd get in there and dig through and get the potatoes, and they would have a horse and wagon, and we'd get the wagon probably darn near full, you know, a corn wagon darn near full of potatoes, and then they'd go into the cellar that was under the house. Did a pretty good job of keeping. For somebody that never liked to eat potatoes, Dad always said they hurt his neck. They always had a lot of them, planted them and dug them, and of course, with, you know, they were used to feeding a big family of kids. And of course, about that time, then the kids were all married and coming home with their kids, so they made good use of a lot of potatoes.
I remember that cellar myself as being like
A dungeon.
well, actually, it seemed to me that I remember it being all the jars of fruit and stuff, and I'd just go down there and salivate looking at it. Thinking, oh, it's all this treasury of
Food, huh? Yeah, yeah.
This is the same cellar where Sis said they went down and they had the wine.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Darn near got me divorced before I'd even been married very long. Because she and Geraldine went down and tapped the wine barrel. Mom had sent them down to get a jar of pickles, and they didn't come back. So she sent me down to see what the heck them girls are doing so long down there, gol dang it. And that was always her favorite thing to say, was gol dang it. And I went down and I yelled, and they'd just sit there and giggle. They didn't answer me, and you couldn't see. You had to go down to where you could see because the wine barrel was back a ways. And I got down there, and here they were. I don't have any clue whether they were as snockered as what they were pretending to be, or whether they were each one leading the other one on. At least they weren't feeling too much pain. And they told me I had to drink some. Well, I didn't particularly like it. It gave me heartburn, so I wasn't real fond of drinking it. And they backed me up against the wall and forced some in my mouth. And of course, I was spitting and sputtering, and I got back upstairs, and here they were giggling and practically falling all over themselves. And Marvin smelled the wine on me and thought I was as drunk as they were, and he was getting mad by the minute. And I kept saying, "But Marvin, I didn't drink any of that crap."